I would like to go through a couple of the steps that I usually teach my students, which are part of my mentorship, in relation to observing and analyzing form. So, of course, some of the basics that we go through is perspective, which is usual. Then we have also the understanding of the way to trace different kinds of shapes in perspective. Which is a quite detailed way to showcase my, I mean, for a student who starts off and needs to understand how to do it, the axes of the ellipses and so on. And of course, one of my exercises that I'm asking for is to analyze the form and reproduce it in perspective, so practice, in order to practice perspective, and also do the orthographic views. The objective of it is simply to be able to actually better understand shape and better express it. So I give generally shapes like that, and then we work them out in this different shape. So in different perspective and orthographic views. So I have a bit of an explanation of what I'm expecting, and the students need to actually try to get to this result, and then of course I'm helping them out. So the video is actually to showcase a little bit of the process that I'm expecting, or at least the way I approach it, and help those of you who need that. And of course, if you want something more personal, you just can join my mentorship for that. But in any case, this is just a bit of an overview, so it's not going to be too long. So the first thing that we do is we're going to be actually trying to analyze the shape. So as I said, of course, before starting and looking outside into the real world and trying to understand the shapes, we start off with some basic shapes that I have developed, and they vary in complexity. This one is to a certain extent a little bit more complex, since it has ellipses, cylinders, and so on. So let me have a look at it and analyze it. So the first thing I'm trying to explain to students is that it is important to be able to understand the shape. All right, understanding the shapes means summarizing it. To be able to summarize it, you can easily see that on this particular shape we have something very simple in the middle. All right, it's kind of a squashed cube, okay, something like that. Because if I analyze the size of it, I would say that it's maybe, I would say, I don't know, something like that, which is about a third of a height of a cube. All right, because I mean, if I go through with it, you know, then here we are about here, right? So that means that it's about a third of the height analyzed wise. I mean, when I analyze it, let me just get this translucency a little higher. Okay, this is one aspect of it. So it's very it's a very simple shape in a way, you know, because it could be, at the first place, it could look like it's quite complex. The basic shape of it is a squashed square. Okay, so that's one of the shapes. So we don't even have to go into detail at this stage. Then the next shapes that we have is we have these rounded these cylinders, right? So it's a simple way to analyze it. Let me just adjust this here. This is not gonna work out. Okay, that's the first shape. Second shape, what do we have? Second shape, we have simply these two cylinders. One of the ways to start to understand, try to understand what we're doing, is to go and start straight off from one of the orthographic views. So wait a second, remove this. Okay, so how would this shape look from one of the views? Okay, so from one of the either side or front views. Let's say that we're looking at it from here. Okay, it looks like something like that. And this can be a work that is done, of course, on a separate piece of paper that is like a rough piece of paper. So this is the proportion of it, because from this view, of course, if I trace more or less a cube, we get something that is more or less about this size, I would say. So another aspect of the exercise is to be able to train the student's eye to understand a little bit better the proportions when they look at proportions at a certain object, and it is something quite important. I understand. I mean, I believe in the process. So this is more or less the shape, the scale of it, or at least the proportion of it from let's say from this view, which could be, we could say that this is the side view, for instance. Okay. Now we see that we have these shapes here. So this means that, let me just do it on another layer. I'm gonna do it roughly, and where does it fall within that space? Let's do some things as the students would also do, and then we can have a look at it. When you look at what I just put as circles, you're gonna see that actually they're maybe not on the right proportion, not on the right scale. Of course, if you have some ellipse guides or some circle guides, you can use them to do a proper work. But here it's again just to showcase the more or less the process I take for analyzing this shape and then building it up. We can see that one of the aspects that we need to analyze when we look at it is what is the space that these shapes take within the rest of the volume, right? We can see that here they don't stick up too much. They're sticking down a little bit more. They seem to be centered somewhere around here, right? And when I look at what I have done with these shapes, these rounded shapes, they're too big. Okay, they're too big. So this is something we can correct. The objective is to always be looking at the bigger shape first, and then adjusting the rest of the shapes around it. So I would say that, let's say that we take something that is okay. Let me just correct that a little bit. Okay, where would that fit? Would it be something like this? And also, where would it be positioned? Is it something like that or something like that? That's one of the questions we could ask ourselves. Then the other question would be, what is the proportion of it? Is it, let me go roughly. Is it, I mean, how many of these cylinders can we fit in between each other? Here it seems like it's about one when I look at and analyze the shape. So this means that I could actually, let me see where I am with my layers. Okay, this layer here is a way for me to analyze from the side view how far should it go. I would say that if it's something about like about that distance does make sense, and then maybe a little bit lower, maybe also a little bit smaller, because when you look at them, they're taking space, but I mean not that much, right? And then of course you can erase part of it. Okay, I would say that they're more or less something like that. It's the objective of this is simply to give it an approximate position. Okay. Another way to analyze it, then the same shape, is when we look at it through the front view. Front view then in this case would be actually, I mean, I'm going quite a lot in detail because I mean, generally this is something that I would do really rapidly in my head, but for students I think it's good that they go through a rough, sketch up of these let's say rough views on different on different paper, on a rough paper where they analyze it and try to understand what they're looking at, because sometimes it could be complex to try to reproduce that, to recreate it in perspective, while actually being lost in the overall details of it. It's important to kind of let's say synthesize or summarize the overall shapes of it. And one of the ways to kind of understand this is, as I said earlier, is we have a general, I would say we have a general squashed cube, 1/3 of a cube slice, okay, onto which we have somewhere we have these two cylinders. That's more or less the basic construction of this shape, without taking into consideration these gaps here and the fact that it goes down and up, and that this has a certain kind of shape that we're going to have a look at later. This is like the basic analysis of this kind of shape, okay? Of course, when the shape is much easier, when it's something like stairs or a block, then it's, I mean, we don't have to even go through it, but at least for this kind of shape I wanted to showcase, because I had some students had some issues. I mean, some of the students that I have, this is part of, as I said, the exercise that we're doing. It's observation and form analysis exercise that I do with all of my students who want to be better in design, improve and level up, depending on the level they are. If this is easy for them to do, we're not going to do it. If they're more at the entry, then we do that kind of exercise. But I needed to showcase it because I want to showcase to some of you that this is some of the aspects that are important for us to be done, at least to be mastered, even though this is just an exercise level. So we said that this one here, these two, yeah, okay, we can okay, so we can say that this is more or less, we said that this is the side view, right? This is what we said. This is the side view, and this is here. Now let's have a look now at another view, without considering the orthographic views and trying to match them together. That's another aspect. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to analyze this shape. A cylinder, it's very easy actually. It's from one side, a cylinder is a circle, okay? From the other, if you turn it, I mean, either way you turn it, this cylinder is a rectangle. I don't even know in English. I think it's rectangle. Let me have a look at that. They say rectangle, right? I believe. Yeah, it's a rectangle. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Rectangle. Anyways, so it's kind of a easy way to start, right? So you can start off with a rectangle here. This shape then you can even imagine that it's going all the way through at this stage, up to you. But then the objective is to be able to imagine where does the other shape that we previously analyzed, which is the simple squashed cube shape, which is here, where does it more or less touch? Where does it intersect with this cube? And we can see that actually one of the places it touches is here, and we have quite some space in the bottom. This would mean that maybe somewhere about here, and that's, you have to eyeball it and give it an approximate location, is where it's gonna intersect. Of course this can be done on a paper, right? I'm doing it on a computer so we can record it easily, but I tend to generally do that when I'm with the students and we do it on paper, but depending on that. Then it's a question of also thinking, okay, how much space do I have here? Okay, let's not do that detail first. Do you feel that from this image the the cylinders are sticking out a little bit, and I would say yes, because if you look at it here and here, they are sticking out a little bit, and this is how I perceive it from that view. This means that the overall squashed cube shape should go up until here. All right. How much does it stick out? We can try adapting those and having a look at it to see where does it more or less seem to be visually going, right? I would say it's something like this. And now that I have traced it, this is why it's important to sometimes trace the elements that we're doing, so that our brain can have a look at it and analyze it and see if it makes sense or not. And one thing I could say now that I have traced it is that this seems like it's not high enough. So this should be maybe a little bit lower. This should be here and here. I would say this is closer. The other side should be exactly the same. So anyways, you could, to do that, you can simply use, you know, guidelines. And of course, it's not a bad thing to actually use a lot of layers of rough sketches. So for instance, this could be one layer of my piece of paper, and then I can, you know, put another piece of paper on top so I can see what I'm doing, and then retrace it properly, right? Just so, and this again these pieces of paper remain just like working purposes. They are not final at this stage. The final that we deliver is, as I have explained a little for more upwards, I'll show you in a second, and what we have analyzed and done on the bottom, and now we have it in a clean view from this point of view. What I'm saying is that this is like rough views, and then we have, it's a draft, and this is like the more of the final presentation for these exercises. Now when I look at it, one of the things that I don't like, because it's again, the objective is to go back and forth between you seeing what you're doing, analyzing what the object is, doing it, sketching it, representing it, and then reanalyzing if what you have done is correct or not. One of the things that I don't like about what I have done and what I have analyzed is that when I look at the proportion between this distance and the distance of the actual cylinder from this view, I think that my cylinder is a little bit too wide. This means that this should be maybe something like that, right? This makes more sense proportion wise to what the object is. And of course, afterwards, the idea is that afterwards we are more sensitive to what we observe by doing these exercises, and we also are able to express our ideas better and more accurately. Okay, that's the main objective of it, of doing these exercises. And if you look at it now, it kind of makes more sense proportion wise. At this stage, I'm not asking a student to be perfectly correct with these shapes and to be able to, you know, represent them exactly, but we need to perceive more or less the right proportions in between. And this is specifically for students who are interested more into industrial design, transportation design, because it's, of course, on vehicles and cars and whatever, we always have, it's a very fine line between change of proportion, change of many aspects which are kind of, you know, related to sensitivity. So this view should be something like that. Okay, now I kind of understand the shape of the vehicle from the vehicle, the shape of the shape from this view. And then, as I say, tell my students, in any case, we can start analyzing the top view now. So this is actually, let's call it front. Okay, and now we're gonna have a top view. The top view, these views, as I said, we do them separately. These are views to help us only build the perspective correctly, okay? So that we have analyzed it and understood what we're about to draw afterwards, okay? After we're going to put them together properly. But top view, we've got a square, so we need to do a square because we said that the shape it's more or less a square. We said that the top view shape here, when I analyze it, it's kind of a square. And anyways, I tell my students that these shapes are based on squares. So anyways, if this is the front view here and this is the side here from top view, then we can implement the rectangle, actually the cylinder, as a rectangle from top view. What we need to do is observe the amount of space that there's left. If you look at this space here, there's a certain kind of distance which is similar on the other side, so we will need to leave those with a approximately with something similar to what is in my reference view. Okay, so this seems fine. We have to analyze and have a look at how much do these cylinders stick outside. We can suppose that the back one is similar. This is just an exercise at this stage, right? So it seems to be sticking to a certain extent. Now, first of all, I need to be thinking about my proportion. Remember earlier we were saying that these cylinders seem to be fitting 3 of them one after the other, right? So this means that if I look at it here, I will need to, first of all, I'll need to leave a little bit of space here. Seems to have a bit of space there too. First of all, I can guide myself with adding some guidelines. Let's put them, these guidelines, lighter, just so that we can see. So these cylinders need to fit more or less here within these lines. So then it's a question of eyeballing. At this stage, I would just want to eyeball, or at least to approximate the position of these cylinders. I don't want to be doing it like mathematically at this stage. Just want to do it visually. So maybe it should be something like this. And don't forget, we can go on another view afterwards and do all that in a clean way, because this can be only a draft, or at least a rough sketch. And we go on the next page. I mean, we add a page on top, and then we can do these rectangles that represent the cylinders from top view. But as you can see, I have used a bit of a construction to help me evaluate where these cylinders are located and how far are they actually in between each other. What's their proportion from top view? And when you look at it, you can see that here now we're a bit closer to the proportion that I corrected earlier. And I think this is much closer to also the actual shape. Then we can do it. We can illustrate it in a more, let's say, clean way, by retracing whatever we need to retrace, etc., etc. Okay, let's not go too long in that one, in that direction. Okay, more or less. Okay, of course, we can see here that distance here is a little bigger than the distance here, so that's not really fine. But that doesn't matter at this stage. I mean, we understand how these shapes look like. Okay, more or less from the top, more or less. Okay. Now, before actually trying to, illustrate them in orthographic views, one of the ways to do it, this was done simply as a rough draft for us to understand the shape. This means that, we know that this is a top view, we know that this is going to be a front view somewhere here, and we know that this is going to be a side view, either on this side or on that side. Doesn't really matter which side in this case. Let me just remove them. As you can see, the orthographic views that we did are not related to each other at this stage, because they were just done for us to understand a little bit the shape. When we're gonna start doing it in a more accurate way for a final presentation, we're gonna use one of these views and then adapt it from that one. Let's do that if you want first, and then we're gonna go into the perspective to illustrate it in perspective view. I would say that one of the most accurate, the feeling of most accurate view would, let's start with the top view. I don't mind. I mean, we can do it with the top view. It's fine. I'll do it with the top view. So you take one of your rough drawings of the top view, put it on another piece of paper. We can, no, let's not make it, we don't need to make it bigger. Let me just show you. Tack. So these were, as I said, this is rough. Let me write it. Wait. This is rough, okay? It's a rough draft. This is just for understanding. Now, we take one of our rough drafts. In this case, we take the top view. We always have in mind, we must always have in mind what this shape looks like, because we have it here. And we always should be considering also what we have analyzed in these rough draft sketches. Now we take the top view, and now that I look at it, I mean, I think that I don't want to use like the square that I have on Photoshop where I could do a exact square, because I want us to be training our eye to analyze the shape and see if we're doing a square. And when I look at it, I believe that for it to be a square, it should be maybe something like that rather. So if I use it as a reference and I put it beneath, okay, and if I look at it again, I'm having a look at the shape that is here and trying to see, are my cylinders fine? And I feel that my cylinders are maybe not, I mean, they're not far, but I mean, like this one seems a little bit bigger than this one, and I mean, I should try to correct it a little bit, so I'm gonna try to correct that right off in the final top view. Now, what you should do, there's another aspect that I try to teach students when they represent orthographic views and even the perspective, is the weight of lines. You have lines that are thin, lines that are thick. Thick lines represent generally an outline, and surfaces that are before or in front of other surfaces, so that we can better understand shape when we communicate it with others. One of the ways to do that is by starting with a light strokes. So you should be sketching in a light stroke, okay? You shouldn't be sketching thick right off, okay? So we should, I mean, use like construction lines that go together, that you can extend construction lines that are that go further than what you want to end. You can use rulers or not, depending. I mean, generally I try to teach students not to use rulers at this stage, just to get their hands, like hand motion, arm motion, to be as accurate as possible by itself, have a nice flow. But in any case, you should go lightly. So here, as you can see, I'm retracing everything in a little bit more of a light manner, like a guide, and I always have a look at what I have here, like this space here. I'm trying to analyze how big should it be, maybe it should be somewhere here. Maybe these cylinders should actually even go a little bit here, and this becomes yet another view for me. Then I take another layer, and I take this one, add another piece of paper on top of it, and then I'm going to do my final top view. So first of all, I'm going to have the outline of the object is always going to be with the thickest lines. Let's put really thick lines so that we can really understand that they're the ones that are bigger. Okay, Tack. I'm really doing, I mean, I do it in a, as I said, in a, as if I'm a student, okay? That's why I do with so many layers and everything. Okay, more or less that's the outline from the top. Here, when you look at it, these lines here, this line here, because it has a surface change here, you know, the section of it, means that this line also should be thick. This one here also should be thick. Then the cylinders also have to be thick because they are a change of direction. And look where I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop where my construction is. Okay, here it is. So this line here, when I want to represent it, I'm not going to make it that thick because the change of surfaces, I don't have a long surface or a vertical surface in between when I look at it if my eye is on top, right? So this line, I will not have it that thick in this case. I'm just going to reduce a bit the thickness here. I mean, in this particular view, it's not that important. And then we have removed the construction. So this is what we have more or less from top view, okay? Now we're gonna use that view to extrapolate the other views, okay? So how are we gonna do that? We're gonna add another layer that will actually, with another piece of paper underneath, on top, sorry, that will actually, I mean, what or you can do it on the same piece of paper with like a lighter pencil or something, that just gonna be stretching off lines, coming as a reference from the top view. This is top view, okay? And we're going to decide, we decided that this is going to be the front view, right? Remember? So we're going to decide about, because we already have this on another rough draft paper. We have analyzed it already, all right? So we're just going to be trying to do it on a clean sheet of paper with the right dimensions, because we need to be actually fitting with the top view, right? So as a cylinder, when you look at a cylinder, it has the same size when you look at it from here, because it becomes a rectangle, right? And then top view, it becomes a rectangle too, okay? So this means that a cylinder has the same size of a rectangle when you look at it from top, when you look at it from the side. This means that this, more or less this size of rectangle, is what I'm gonna be using here. Okay, then I'm gonna look at what I have done here. How far have I placed this upwards? Where have I placed this overall volume? And what I can do is I can, in a very thin manner, with my construction lines, let me add a thin line here, you know, position it properly, have a look at where I had it before, and I believe it should be a little bit higher. Then I can imagine where would this surface go, how far up is it gonna go, and then I have to analyze. I'm looking at the size I have here and the size I have here, which seems very similar. There, in this case, I could try to, if I'm taking into account what I already have as sizes, and I have that this size is already given. This means that if it's given, that means that this size is already given from this point of view, from top view to side view. This means that I can already trace at least the vertical part of it, and then I can see what's up. This size here should fit in the same way on that side, so it should be maybe somewhere rather around here, at least. So these construction lines are gonna help me to do the final outline. We said that this height is a little lower, so I should stop it about here. If I stop it about here on this side, this means I need to stop it at the same height on the other side. Tack. We got something like that. Okay, it's a little too thick, I would say. When I look at it, look, it has a certain tallness here that, I mean, it has a certain, it's a little taller than it should, and this is something we could, I mean, you could correct, you know, you could correct it, especially on this view. And I think one of the reasons why is because I don't have enough space on the inside. This means that I can go back to what I had here and give it another construction line here, and then go back and correct part of my work. This means I need to go lower here, most likely, right? Because these two things, these two distances need to be the same. I mean, this view and this view, this size and this size. Same on the other side. Let's correct that one. And here, of course, these two need to fit height-wise. This is a little bit better. Let's correct it in this view as well. Where am I? Okay. More or less. Maybe it's even too far, I would say. But yeah. And then we just remove the construction to have a look at what we have done. Okay, and these views need to always fit. You cannot move it here, you cannot move it here. These views, the orthographic views, need to fit with one another. So we said that from this view, that's how it's going to look like. Now we should actually develop the side view, right, which we decided here. A side view is, of course, I mean, I'm not going to go into detail, but all the views need to fit in between each other. This is something I'm explaining my students. I'm not going to go into explaining why and how it works, but for those who have had the lesson with me already, they know what we're talking about. Side view. Side view, one of the elements that we have as a reference is that we already have the height of the cylinder. So this means that I can go on the side view like that, put a couple of very light lines that can help me guide the height of what I'm doing. And then it doesn't matter where I put it. The distance that we have in between our objects on the orthographic view doesn't really matter at this stage. Okay, we can do it however we decide. And then we do it. We do a circle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the guide here because it needs to be clean. So the circle, I'm gonna do it with 3 pixels. Okay, more or less like that. And what did we say? We said a couple of things. We said that we have another circle more or less here as a reference, and we have another circle here more or less as a reference. We can remove this one in order to analyze how far should we go. Then we said that the height of the bottom, I mean, let's go in another way. We said that, I'm gonna do it roughly here just to tell you, to show you. We have a look at where this edge is. This edge is more or less here, and we have this whole distance that needs to be sticking out of the shape on the side. So this means that more or less here is where I'm going to have it. The way to analyze if I'm right is trying to redo what we mentioned earlier related to a third of a cube. So if I'm trying to do something like that, let's just do that. Do I get the feeling of a cube? If I do, as a reference, right? Because if I do, because here I have to follow it because of this. This is the height of the bottom. If I do what we did earlier, where we analyze the shape as it being a third of a cube, we see that maybe we are too long. You know, we are a squashed cube. We are like that, which is not okay. We need to be. This is not okay as well. Okay, what we need to be is I mean, dead on to the kind of a cube separate in three, okay, proportion wise. This means that where I have placed the distance that I have left for the cylinders is too small, and we can also see it here, because when you look at that, it seems a little longer, right? And one of the things that wait a second, okay, I don't want to retrace all that, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select it for you guys to, you could actually you could select it. That's something you can do on your side and readjust it. You know, now is the right proportion. Another way to actually do it, and I don't go into that much of a detail, and then of course you remove the bottom part. Okay, that's much closer. Another way to actually be able to determine if what exactly is, you know, by the book, you know, what exactly is the shape, that where exactly do these, let me add another color here, where exactly do these lines end and what exactly is this shape here, is by using the reference from your top view. You can take construction lines here, you know, then you have a 45-degree direction, which then puts down where this line ends, etc., etc. I don't want to go into that because it becomes a little bit technical. It's not necessary, you know. Here the objective is not so much to draft a proper orthographic view, but to understand shape and to use orthographic views as a reference, you know. So at this stage we don't need that. Okay, where are we? Okay, here. And then of course you remove the parts that are behind, and that's it. And then you remove the construction lines, and of course in this particular view all of the lines are going to be thick, so there's not a question of thick or thin lines. The only lines that were thin were these ones, and I believe that the circles here should be of course a little bit thicker. Let me just do it a little bit thicker, like that. Okay. Okay, we're good with this one, huh? Wait a second, what have I analyzed here? Sikatla, no, this one here, this one there. Okay, let's just checking where my layers are. Okay, so this means that on a clean piece of paper we have more or less analyzed and created the orthographic views which represent the shape. Now comes the harder part for the students, is how do we represent this shape in perspective. Of course, so yeah, to represent this part in perspective, of course you need to understand the perspective rules. It's something that we go through. We need to understand the techniques and the steps of building ellipses in perspective by using a cube or by using a square that helps you build it. Some of the rules that I share with my students. And one of the aspects that I do is that I'm ask students to do perspectives, 2-point perspective. No, you don't have to do a 3-point perspective for this one at this stage. Okay, so here we have the rough draft that we don't need anymore. We're going to remove it. We have the final orthographic views that we have developed here. Okay, so now you know how to develop them. I'm going to put them here. And the only thing I wanted to say for the perspective is that I generally ask to have a very wide distance between the vanishing point A, you know, and B, the both vanishing points. We're doing a 2-point perspective, so that the perspective is not too exaggerated. Okay, so let's go through how I'm doing. How would I represent the shape? Because once we have analyzed and understood more or less how the shape is, the objective is to be able to express it in perspective. You can choose the perspective angle and view that you want to have. It's not a question. So we can imagine that I have used 2 pieces of paper if I do it on paper, okay, and on these 2 pieces of A4 or leather paper I trace on the higher edge the horizon line, and on the ends of it I put my vanishing points to give it a maximum of distance so that it's not too skewed, the perspective. What I do afterwards is I try to create a lot of lines. This is, I mean, generally I have let's say a lot of it's perspective guides that I have already built if I need them, but for students that don't have, it's important to you can work them out like that. You just take, I mean, after you have understood the perspective theory and how it works, everything, this is absolutely necessary, of course, but once that is understood, this is practicing it. And one of the ways to practice it is to try to re-express a shape using these perspective guides or perspective help that I'm doing now. So what I'm doing is I'm just giving myself, and you should give yourself also quite some lines as a reference from both of the vanishing points. This is something that you could have done prior, or maybe you can use the software to do it. Doesn't really matter. I mean, generally I show that to students. I work with the students who are actually doing it on paper, so it could be a little harder for them to do it. And I also ask them to always make sure that they trace this in a very light manner, because these guides are only there to help us. Okay, at this stage. Okay, so now we have more or less an overall guide of the perspective. Okay, the way I would do the exercise if I had to do it myself, I'm gonna show that, and then I'm gonna show how a student could develop it. Okay, so we have this as a base. One of the ways is to, first of all, to decide, do you want to do it? I mean, of course you need to avoid doing it too much in the corners, which is close to the vanishing points, because it will be, your perspective will be excessively squashed like that. Okay, depending on what you're looking for, of course. Easiest is dead middle, but then you have a piece of paper in the middle, it's not going to be so easy. But anyways, let's imagine we don't have a piece of paper and we just have these 2 vanishing points with a reference, okay, and of course a horizon. As I said, I'm not going through how are we gonna how do we build the perspective and perspective theory at this stage, because it's quite long. I just want to adapt my shape that I have understood, analyzed and understood, and recreate it, redraw it. One of the ways to redraw it, I mean, for us as I mean, once you get professional and everything, is just you just, okay, you have it in mind, okay, and then you just start building it, okay, and you can change where is it that you're building it, you know, and then you just go, and then with what you're drawing, you're gonna readapt your sketch. I don't want to show it this way because you're not gonna understand much of the technique that I'm gonna be using, okay, so let's forget that, and let's rather use the technique that you're gonna be doing as a student. And one of the ways to be, what I'm telling to students is, I don't want to have it the exact same view. You can change the view of it, it doesn't really matter. So I believe that one of the ways to start, at least the way I would start this, is first of all I would be looking at where do I want to have my first cylinder. And my first cylinder, we can analyze the cylinder as a volume like that, okay, which is actually a you know, a square that I have extruded square. So I can decide that my square, doesn't really matter, is here, because there's no interrelations here, right, at this stage. The only thing that I need to get right here in order for this cylinder to work is I need to really get a square, because if I do it like that, it's not gonna work. It's not the right proportion. This is more closer to a square, so I need to be able to do that properly. Then I need to analyze how far does this cylinder go back. So I need to be looking at this what I have done here previously, and then following the perspective that I have done, I can visually position more or less where I believe that this should be the overall I would say casing of the. And if you look at my lines, for instance, now that I'm gonna be going into the line, the same direction as my reference, which is underneath. You see this line here? This is the line that I need to follow. If I go higher, then it's here. If I go lower, it's here. It always follows what's in the back, what is with the light stroke. Okay, this maybe is even a little bit more narrow. Well, not too much, but something like that. Then this square, I can reduce the opacity, or I can put another piece of paper on top of it, and following the rules that I already explained, we could create the ellipse. I'm not gonna go through it now, because the students that are with me, they know about it, but generally it's you need to find the axis. Okay, let's go through it for a couple of. You need to find the center axis where it is by having an X on your square. More or less, you need to be accurate with what you're doing. Then from that space, you need to trace a line that's within the perspective. Okay, I'm going very, very rapidly on it. Then on that line, if that line is correct with the perspective, you need to find a 90-degree perpendicular. Okay, this perpendicular shape is going to be the major axis, and this here is going to be the minor axis in this particular perspective. Okay, and then it's up to you to trace an ellipse that is proper within it. Now the ellipse that's not okay. I'll give you an example of what's not okay. That's not the correct ellipse. First of all, it's not an ellipse. So one of the other exercises I'm doing with my students is that I'm asking them to practice a lot on a piece of paper to just draw ellipses in different openings, you know. Some that are like that, some that are like that. Okay, but to go with a motion in your hand, not to go like that. That's not okay. We discussed that already anyways, a lot. Okay, so here this is not okay because it doesn't fit with the square. If you look at an ellipse from the face, or at least the circle, within a square, a circle fits everywhere within the square. It touches here, it touches here, it touches here, it touches here. This means that my ellipse here needs on this axis to be touching. Let me correct that. I mean, of course, on paper is a little bit more. Wait a second. It needs to be done from one shot, okay, if possible. Okay, we're not far. Okay, as you can see, I mean, it's more or less on spot, and a little bit more like that. Okay, that's my ellipse. This was whatever was this one here. I'd rather have it like that. Then same construction that we have done here, we need to do that on the back part of it, you know, tack, everything, but I'm not gonna go through it because it will be a little bit long. Then I need to trace the other aspects of this shape of this cylinder. This is, for instance, this is a wrong perspective, so you need to really be something like that, I would say. Then here we know that it needs to end, and it needs to end with a more open ellipse than actually this one. Open means that this is like closed and this is open. This is a closed ellipse. this is an open ellipse going towards a circle, so this needs to be a little bit more open in the back. Okay, maybe something like that. I don't ask students to be perfectly drafting this. What I want is like an overall feeling of it. Okay. Of course you should go through it on the other side and everything, but we're not gonna. Okay, let's leave it anyways for the moment. It might help. All right. Here, the reason why I want to leave it is because I want to be able to have a look at it in perspective, throughout in perspective. Don't forget that this is a rough pass. We're gonna add another one afterwards. Okay. So we have one of the shapes. I would say that the shape that I have drawn, when I look at it now, and I look at this one, it is too long. So this means that this here is not okay. Maybe it should be. Let me put it on another layer here. Maybe it should be something here, rather like that, I would say. And here, this one, that would make more sense proportion wise, I would say, right? And then when I look at it and I analyze it, I believe that does make more sense. Okay, more or less. Now I need to be thinking about what we had earlier. Let's add another layer that's gonna serve us as just as a rough. Okay, so I need to, next to this shape, consider another cylinder. Okay, and then consider yet another cylinder here, right? Then from this cylinder I need to consider the perspective. This is wrong perspective because it doesn't lead to the vanishing point. Anyways, I'm not gonna go into that, but I use my guides underneath to help me that. And this one here should go to this one, so more or less there. So more or less here is where I need to end. This is gonna be just as a construction. I'm not gonna use it for anything else. Then on top of it, I'm just gonna redo my ellipse by doing exactly everything I have done here, meaning I do the construction, find the center point, find the axis, etc. Okay, I'm not gonna go through that. And think about doing it from one shot if possible. Okay. Now this one is not the best. Let's do it again. But it's good to have something underneath that helps you with understanding where you need to do it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this ellipse, yeah, this one should be more like more spontaneous, right? Don't hesitate to turn the paper to be in the right angle for you to appreciate it. Anyways, we don't really care because at this stage, this yeah, this one should be a little bit because the center of axis should be turned. Even this one, I think it's the axis of it should be a little bit more like that, because you know the center of the ellipse, major axis, minor axis pointing should be pointing in the direction of the perspective. Okay. Now I've done that one. This means that here this is where that should be going, and this means that here that's more or less where this should be going. How far should it go backwards? Well, it depends on the perspective. If we look at this perspective, maybe it should go about here, as we thought earlier, right? And then here, how do we know, is this like, is it like that? Is it like that? What is it? Then you need to construct the back of it. Okay, it's a square. The square has an x. The x has a center. The center has a minor axis direction. The minor axis then has an ellipse. And the ellipse, this all showcases me that I need to be about here. Okay, if I want to be more or less correct. And if you look at it, I mean, I'm not too far. Okay, not so bad, although I feel that they're a little bit too far apart. That's my feeling at this stage. Doesn't matter. Okay, at this stage we continue on. Okay, as you start to belong. Then we need to look at what we have analyzed here and try to create this shape on the side. We're gonna do it full first. So remember the distance we left here. So the distance we're leaving here, it's important to consider that it's an approximation at this stage. So we're gonna just do that. Have a look at it here. Maybe it's here. Then we're gonna build upon it. Okay, tack. I'm just gonna make it full first. Let's make it full first. And we need to stop also before the end. If I stop here, it's too far. It should stop, and I need to leave a distance on this part as well, right? Then here, following the perspective, of course, right? Tack, 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 and this is one of the sides that I have, okay? But then I look at the proportion that I have here, and I see that it's not quite right. This maybe is good, but this one should be more like here. Okay, maybe that should be rather here. And don't hesitate to adapt, but of course each time you put a line, think about the perspective. Don't put this line this way, and when you put a line here, don't put it this way or that way. You need to look at the back, what you have as the perspective guide, and use that perspective guide. Okay, this is more or less the right shape. Okay, and then we should see a little bit of that junction here and here. Now, of course, there's a way to analyze how far we're gonna see it on the other side, but at this stage I think you could simply suggest that it's just gonna be a corner, something like that, not much more than that. And then of course we've got a little bit of that and that, because if I take this edge and take it towards the vanishing point over there, it's gonna stop about here and it's gonna go down, and that's about as much as we need. Now this is a rough view. We're gonna, where is it? We're going to take it, this rough view, and we're gonna take another piece of paper on top of that view. And now that I look at it again, as I said, I feel that it's always good to analyze what you're doing and to be able to be critical of your work in order to improve what you're doing. So one of the things that I'm gonna do here that I'm seeing is that I am too long. My shape, the way I've done it, is that I am too long, too far in that direction. I'm too far in that direction. It's as if I have taken the shape and I have done that more or less by keeping circles or cylinders. That's how I have drawn it in this draft, which is not the right proportion. So in order to wait a second, in order to fix that, I don't have to redraw everything. I can just, you know, have a look at what I have done and then correct it by starting somewhere. So these lines are good, so I can use them already. This is not, I mean, it's not wrong in a way. I think this is, look at the distance, this is too long, so I think that this should be more rather here. Okay, now we're a little bit closer to how it should be. When you look at it here, you look at it here, and even here it's better. Okay, now I believe this is going too far backwards. This means that I can stop this shape much earlier. Don't forget, we're not doing a 3-point perspective, and we're just doing a 2-point perspective. Okay, something more or less like that, although the perspective should be more like that. I'm gonna cut it off a little bit, make it a little bit shorter, because otherwise I feel it's not okay. As I said, proportion wise, it's good to always be analyzing what you're doing how you're doing it and if it's fine or not. Okay, this is better, I believe, and I believe that if this is good here, let's add this perspective. I mean this. As I said, just a reference. I'm just gonna get the right perspective that I had prior, and anyways I'm gonna erase that part here, don't forget, right? This one's gonna be erased anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So we have this one here, okay, and then now what I want to do is I want to take this one, take this ellipse, and I want to move it this way because I feel that it's squashed, it's going too far. As I have reduced from here, I want to reduce it from here as well a little bit. To do that, I simply redraw the same shape a little bit closer. Alright, maybe not that much, then it's a question of perception, right? To see how close you're gonna do it. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is more or less right because it's in between this line and this line. Okay, then I have a look at the top. The top should go a little bit inwards because I look at that line and this line is pointing this way, so I shouldn't be too much off. Okay, and of course, as I said, don't hesitate to turn the shape. When I look at it, it's a little closer now to the perspective I got there. And with the mounted sticking here, I believe that here we should be at least going at least up until here, and then do, if we look at it here, look, let's have a look now. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is more or less right, so this means perspective wise, huh? And then we got this one here. Okay, of course, as I said, I'm not gonna go that much into detail if I do it for myself or if I do it for communication purposes rapidly with a client or with a colleague. But for this case, we better do it this way. So then, of course, the question is, all this cylinder here needs to move this way a little bit because we have reduced the distance that we had here. So to do that, we need to reconstruct the proper cube here on the right location with the proper space and everything, and actually recreate the how do you call it, the ellipse. But we don't really need to bother that much because we're not gonna see that much of it, although it's good that you could do it. I mean, it's good to do it in a good way, you know, like for now it starts to become what I don't like is tack 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 tack. This is not a nice way to do it. So one of the ways is to, as I said, to try to trace it in one shot. And this should be more like that. This ellipse should also be a little bit more like that and a little bit more inwards, right? That's what we said earlier. And I still make sure it fits within a perspective, meaning that if I take this direction here, they fit, both heights fit. If I take this one here and go here, both heights are fitting as well. And of course this one here, this ellipse should be a little bit more open, and this one here should be a little bit more close. How much comes from the answer to the square. Does the square, how open is this square compared to this square, and it all should fit with the perspective. Okay, wait, because I traced on top of it. Okay, now this one moved a little bit forward as well, maybe not that much. Okay, something like that. Yeah, I think that still this here, this perspective, maybe like that. a little bit more. I'm looking at the perspective guide that I have underneath. Okay. I'm trying to, as much as I have moved it here, I move it there as well. This is just to correct a little bit the proportions, okay? And then I'm finishing it off by finishing on the other side, thinking where does this one go perspective wise. It goes about here, so this means I can stop maybe about here. Now we remove the rough that has been rough draft, which is underneath. Wait a second, where is it? Why is it not here? Okay. And then we try to, and there's something missing here. Look at the, you see this is wrong, this is wrong. Looking at the perspective, looking at this line, so it should be more or less somewhere here. When I look at it here, I can of course then correct it visually. Okay, what I'm showcasing is not that much of course, as I said, you need to know perspective. We need to have practice perspective for very basic shapes first on. That's stuff that is, it's part of the exercises we're doing. But what we can always do is we can always correct what we have done afterwards, once that we have positioned the elements properly in perspective and using our guide to kind of help us. But the objective is not that much to draft something mathematically accurately, although perspective wise it needs to be proper, but the objective is to represent a shape with the more or less the proper dimensions, or at least proportions, or the way it's perceived, in a perspective view, right? That's the objective of it. Okay, and I'm going to show you one last thing here related to line weight. So you can see that this shape here, if I remove the grid, this shape, I mean, we could imagine that they're linked, and then what we could do, very simple, for the final presentation page, we take this as a shape. We know that it's already proper. Okay, we know that these views are good as well. We position them properly on a piece of paper, different layers, and then we put a piece of paper on top of it. Damn it. Wait. Okay. And wait a second. There we go. Okay, how far? Okay, we position them on a rough piece of paper. We lower the opacity, and we retrace it properly. I believe that these ones we have kind of, I mean, finalized them, so for them we don't need to retrace them. Let's imagine that we have done it. But I wanted to add one last note on the line weight of something that has been traced in perspective. I would say that first of all, it's good to be tracing all the lines in a light manner, okay? And then I'll show you which lines should be traced thicker. So imagine that let's go through it. We retrace it. Of course, don't go off perspective wise, then it will lose the accuracy that you have developed. Okay, let's go real fast with it. Thin lines, you know. Yeah, the thing is that then I'll have to, let's go with it. Of course, now I'm using the fact that it helps for vertical lines, but you can okay, this one was maybe not necessary to go through it, but I'm thinking that still it's important to showcase which aspect, which lines okay, like that. Tack. You see, I'm trying to put it properly so that it's not off perspective wise. Of course, I could have done it like that and then, you know, just traced it, you know, with the Photoshop aspect of tracing straight lines. Of course, that's possible. It's just that, you know, in car design, we at least in car design, well, we don't that much have straight lines, you know. Generally, there's always some kind of a curvature. Okay, so now we need to retrace in a light manner the cylinders and everything. I'm not gonna go through it, but they need to be retraced lightly. And then on top of it, we need to decide what is gonna be thick. So we're gonna have thick lines on all outlines. So I'm gonna have a thick line here for sure. I'm gonna have a thick line here. Wait a second. Thicker line. I'm gonna have this too thick. Okay. Then I'm gonna have a thicker line here. I'm gonna have a thicker line here, 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 of the overall outline of the object. Okay, for sure. Then I'm gonna have a thicker line here, just to help express shape. That's why I'm showing it. You can find your own style of expressing it, although for orthogonal views it's quite important to kind of follow that thick to thin aspect. Tack, tack, tack. This should be thick, and this should be thick as well. Now, where are the other thick lines? Imagine that everything is thin. Everything that is in front of a surface, or that has a surface facing 90 degrees towards our point of view, should be thicker. This is not thick. This is not thick. It's light. This is a light line. This is also a light line because we see the change of surface. But a surface that is behind what we see, that we don't see, then it needs to be thick. So here, for instance, I have a surface here, and then it goes behind. I cannot see it, so it should be thick. Okay. Here, this one is the same because there's a surface going this and then this way, and it goes behind. Now this line here is not thick because we can see the change of surfaces. Okay. So this is also thick because at the end of it there's a change and it drops down. Now this here is in front of that surface wise, so this means that I need to go with a thick line all the way through the cylinder, and actually all the way through here. That should be a thick line, and I should go all the way through because it goes behind, right? There's a volume that exists behind it, so I need to express that there's a change of shape. These lines here, this remains thin. Okay, not gonna go through it, but I just want to say that this is thin. This remains thin. This remains thin also. Just correct that a little bit here. As remains thin, this line here remains thin, and this line here remains thin as well. Let me just I mean, when you're on paper you can maybe not do that, but these ellipses, I mean, because I traced them in such a manner, they're not perfect, honestly, but I should have done it in a different way, especially these junctions here. Now what we don't want to end up with having like a change of volume that is, I mean, it's not so nice. But I mean, I didn't use any guides here, so I mean, it was just for you to get the point. Anyways, I'm not gonna trace it, just so you can see that this should be, come on, wait a second. Yeah, when you do the ellipses at the end, ideally it's good to start them early on. So at least let's see what I do when I, yeah, more or less, let's say it's more or less good, it fits. And then you have your final presentation board where everything is clean. That this is done on perspective. And one thing I see now that I flipped it is if it's possible for you to flip it, it's something that is good to do. Is that first of all, this is going too far backwards, right? Volume. So this one needs to be checked. It's going a little bit too far backwards, and for sure, this one is sticking out too much. When I look at it, I think this should be maybe here, not more than that. Okay. And that's related to perception, right? What do you perceive? And I believe that this is sticking, this is too much inwards. I think this should be maybe here. Because there's not that much space when you look at it. Look, there's not that much space. So I believe these corrections here were necessary. All right, I'm gonna end it here just so for you to the objective was just to show a bit of the process. All right.